Good evening, Dr. Miles.
Good evening to you and to our viewers. I'd like to say good afternoon to everyone and welcome to another segment of Let's Talk About It. I do want to say, first of all, Happy New Year's to everyone. And we're very happy that you all are on with us. We're also happy that you made it through Christmas and throughout the entire holidays. So I hope you had a blessed one. I hope your family is all joyous, and I just hope that everything is going well for you. Jackie and I are very excited about the new year and the new programming that we have for you. So I just want to explain to y'all, Jackie usually is in transit. So she's usually coming on late or you can't see her. She's so committed to this, to the live stream that she'll do whatever it takes to make sure that she's on with us. She don't want to miss any of it. So I'm really happy that she's doing that any way that she can do it.
And that is so true, Dr. Miles. Thank you very much for sharing that information. I am, in fact, in transit, but I find these shows just informative, and it's wonderful to share. So I'm definitely making every effort to be here regardless.
Hey, Jackie, I want to share with you, I'm not sure you can see me, but I have my winter scarf on. I couldn't wait. In Atlanta last night, it was 27 degrees. Folks, it was cold here. It was cold. And today it got up to like 50. Tonight it'll get down to 30 degrees. But it's really, really cold. And you
I
saying,
can see you, Dr. Miles. You look quite festive for the new year in
well,
your black and white scarf. You look wonderful.
I'm not sure about that, but I know it's cold. It is cold in Atlanta. So,
well, you look nice and warm and toasty.
I tell you, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, it's been such a minute for me to put the scarf on that I forgot how to even tie it. But so much for my fashion trend. I do want to say that I'm just really excited about the new year. I'm really excited about our programming. And as you all know, that oftentimes we have these programs, of course, programmed for about 6 months out. But I want to make these episodes real time for you. So as real events pop up, I will also make sure that we go real live time with you to make sure we're addressing certain issues. So Jackie, I want to share that, well, I want to first of all share with you who we are. I'm Dr. Willie Miles. I'm the president of Dr. Willie Miles Children's Foundation located in Atlanta, Georgia. And Jackie Hampton Clennis is on with us, and she is an educator out of South Florida, but she's also the CEO of Valley of the Giants, which is an educational consulting company that works with school districts. So she's always my co-host. And again, if we have any new viewers on, we welcome y'all. Looking forward to sharing and enlightening you on things that are happening with parents and with children. You know, it's kind of interesting, Jackie. People are saying, well, we see you all over social media, but you have Miles Children, then you have Miles Just Talking. And when I share with our audience that Miles Children is really dedicated to children, we make children our priority. We're not for profit here in Atlanta. And our focus is helping parents get information, right, Jackie? The parents and the community on.
Yes, because we, identified that there was a void in many of the conversations that we're holding. So we really do feel like it's a service, and each conversation, our time is always exhausted before the topic. So we are definitely dedicated to improving the lives of children through working with their parents.
Jackie, I see one of my, I'm going to say clients, I won't call her full name, but Leah, go to sleep. I think Leah is 12 years old, and she follows me everywhere. I said, she can't follow me on Miles Just Talking because that's adult talking.
Dr. Miles, that is too cute.
Yeah,
but Leah, you need to go to bed if you're 12 years old.
Our family is a great family, but Leah's on. And tonight's topic is okay, though, because she can listen to this topic. We're on Miles Children, so we're going to keep it, where families can view it, can chime in with us. But on Miles Just Talking, I deal with adult issues.
Okay.
But I'm not going to advertise tonight, Jackie. What I want to do, because I think it's going to take a little time up, is to talk about our topic for this week and also our topic for next week. So our topic for this week is when grandparents do harm. Jackie, our topic for next week is going to be when parents do harm. The following week after that.
Go ahead.
Go on, Jackie.
I just wanted to add that both of those are so crucial When the inspiration for these topics came up, they were just things that I'm not sure we actually even thought about. And of course, we share with our audience that so much of this is actually practice. We are not just podcasters, we actually practice in the areas that we talk about.
Right. Well, I want to share with you that the week after next, and I don't have those dates, but we're dealing with yeah, youth and teen substance abuse. And the last week, we're going to deal with parents who do drugs with their children, which is another story. All right, we'll talk about that. And that's why the show is called Let's Talk About It. So, Jackie, another announcement. On the next week, we're going to start advertising, and I hate to say this, like Black History shirts, because Black History should be all the time, but it's going to be our t-shirts that it's a fundraiser for us, and it deals with um, social justice, and you'll be seeing those on all the social media. So we're going to ask you guys to make sure you support us. Those who didn't send in holiday contributions, buy the shirts. At least you'll get the shirt, and we'll be able to help some people. So do that for us. But we'll start advertising next week. All right?
Right. And
Let's
I'm
sort of
looking
like jump
forward
into
to
the
those.
topic.
Okay. Um,
I'm sorry, go on.
well, I just wanted to say I'm really looking forward to the shirts because messaging is so important. So I'm excited to see the social media come out about those. But tonight's topic is also very, very exciting. I think some of our audience is going to find it a bit surprising. But again, with the goal being to improve the lives of children by enlightening our listeners, I think we're going to get a lot out of tonight. So why don't you go ahead and introduce it?
All right. It's called tonight's topic is when grandparents do harm. Now I want to share with you why I chose this topic, because we had another topic for tonight. I chose this topic because, this past weekend, I think many of y'all know that I'm a therapist by trade, all right? So this past weekend, I got a call from 3 different Black male teenagers complaining about their grandparents. And I was kind of alarmed. I said, this is kind of like, I received a call on New Year's Eve night. Well, it was really like New Year's Eve morning, because it was like 12:30 a.m., right? And the kid was just in shock. He said, I just cannot believe that my grandmother called me these names. And he said, this is my grandma, somebody who I respect. And I would just say some of the names he said she called him. That she called him gay, that she called him no good. He'll be just like his daddy. Now, mind you, the 3 males that call me are not relatives. They don't even know each other. And they're all going through puberty. They're between the ages of 13 and 15, Black males. And these are Black female women who, I would say, verbally abuse them. All right.
Right, and that is very appropriate terminology. Why our conversation tonight is so important. And Dr. Miles, adding the fact that it's a grandparent, we really have to talk about the level of harm that does, because
Right.
typically you expect your grandparents, if no one else, to be protective and loving. So I'm excited about this topic.
Let me give you the other 3 scenarios. So that was one scenario where the grandmother called him all these names, and she called because he did not respond to her, but he did not respond because he was with his grandfather, and his grandfather told him not to respond because he was helping him at that point. The other situation is a grandmother who lives with the grandchild and tells the grandchild that she hates him. This is a 11-year-old. The grandmother tells him that she hates him, that she doesn't like him, and that she doesn't want anything to do with him because he's a demon. Now, the kid calls and says, what's amazing, their responses were very simple. Can you believe my grandmother called me this? Can you believe my grandmother? I mean, they're like in shock. So I'm not taking this lightly. From a therapeutic perspective, that was trauma for these kids. So we got 2. And the third one, the grandma says, I wish you were never around here because you're no good. So
Just absolutely, even hearing it is shocking.
now, what we're going to do, Jackie, we're going to be balanced tonight because we're going to talk about, there's some good grandparents. There's some good ones. Of course, we have no problem with that. There are great grandparents out there. For a matter of fact, guess what? When I was doing the research, I thought about myself and what I was doing to my grandson and to my sons. Because as grandparents, Jackie, sometimes we want to make sure that our children understand, you don't tell us what to do. These are our grandchildren. And you don't want to have candy? I'm going to give them as much candy as I want to give them.
Right, it's usually those grandparents that say, "Okay, baby, get what you want. We won't tell mom and dad."
What should not be happening? And I felt guilty because I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I'll just check. I told my grandson, I said, when you come to my house, I said, don't listen to your daddy. I said, I'm the one in charge here. I said, anything you want to do, I said, because I'm the granddaddy. He calls me Papa, and I'm realizing that was wrong. It was cute for me to say that, but guess what? It was wrong for me to tell my grandson that. And
yes.
And I was so bold, Jackie. I even told my son, I told him that.
Perhaps the language, but there's also a certain expectation, especially when this is done in love, that,
right.
Your grandparents spoil you. And that's a very loving thing. So as long as you and dad know that you're going to be spoiling them, then maybe it's not a bad thing.
Well, I'm going to tell
wording.
Jackie, ready? Because I thought the same way. And according to our research and according to the harm that it does, they ain't no loving like that.
Okay.
And we respect the boundaries of those children's parents.
Okay. All right.
And I was kind of like taken aback. I said, I don't care what the research says until I saw the damage that it does to the child and the confusion that it causes for the child. And also, it also puts the grandparent, now these are the good things, it puts the grandparent in a situation where, guess what, I'm more superior than your daddy is. So you listen to me. Anything you want, come and call me and tell on your daddy or your mama. Are you with me?
Well, now that I do understand. And you know what, that's pretty common too. That's definitely happened in my home.
But I want to share though, those things should not be happening, and we have to watch it. Whether look at the messaging we're sending. Now, let me get the background. There are 2.7 million grandparents in the United States that are taking care of their grandchildren. 2.7
staggering numbers.
That's 2.7 million grandparents are taking care of grandchildren. Now, of course, Jackie, as you know, these grandparents are taking care of these children based upon the kids' parent situation. Like some are in jail, some are dead, some had the child and just left. Are you with me? So there are different circumstances.
Right. So you're already sort of in a trauma situation based on the fact that the grandparents had to step in and provide primary care.
Right. But the thing about it is that the grandparents had to step in and provide the care. But if you recall, Jackie, and our audience, about a month ago, we did a live stream on generations, right? Generation and so forth. So what we have these grandparents taking care of grandchildren based upon some old things that they learned when they were younger. Like children are to be seen and not heard.
Not heard, yes.
So we have 2.7 million grandparents are taking care of grandchildren, and oftentimes, let's talk about grandparents. And audience, you guys can climb in at any time, right here on Facebook Live and on Instagram. These parents have already lived their life, these grandparents, and they're in a settling mode. Are you with me?
Absolutely.
They're ready to sit down somewhere. And they find themselves in a situation where they have to start all over again. You're talking about raising like 3- and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds when all your children have been grown for 10 years.
And you've adjusted to a certain lifestyle at that point. So again, it can be a lot to go backwards in its way.
There's a lot to adjust to. And in those adjustments, stress is caused. So, I have a grandmother who is an aunt who's in her 70s who's raising her nieces and nephews. And they are from 6 up to age, let's say 15. But the point is that we have to understand that older people like myself, we're ready to go to bed at 8 o'clock.
Absolutely.
where
And
young
that younger generation is just getting started. That, yeah.
Jackie, they're just getting started. Their evening is just getting started. So we understand the stress that grandparents are under. We understand that, and we acknowledge that. And before we get into like the details of the evening, I do want to say also that we understand that there are millions of fantastic grandparents out there. There are millions of fantastic grandparents out there. But there are some grandparents who actually sabotage the child rearing of their grandchildren. So, Jackie, I want to offer this to our audience. If anytime you guys want to chime in, please go to our chat box and just start chatting with us, because the more you chat, the more we like it. All right. So
And the
here we
more
are.
beneficial it is to what we're trying to do and the information we're sharing. And just,
Right. Jackie, you're going in. Jackie, your audio, you're going in and out.
okay, what about now?
So until you get straight, I'll just keep talking. Your volume,
Okay, go ahead.
you're going in and out. Your voice.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
I'll just keep talking to you, and you can get that resolved. So, but the thing that troubled me the most about these grandparents who are talking to these grandchildren, whether they be girls or boys, the first thing I looked at was the age of the children. And then, of course, I got kind of my feelings because the children were going through puberty and they're already stressed. And so I don't think grandparents and parents realize that when grandparents say things, uh, not just negative, but I'm going to say which are verbally assaultive to the grandchildren, I see it and I treat it as trauma. And I'll tell you why I treat it as trauma. Because it has shocked the kid. It has shocked him. And he's not sure how to respond to it. And even though mom talks to him and tell him the reason grandma did it, he says, I'm okay. But when I talked to him, he said, I'm really not okay. So which means that he will have that imprinted in his brain for the rest of his life. Now, the problem is that if he uses it as an excuse not to progress, that's another story, right? But we're talking about the imprint, the emotional imprint that we leave on children as grandparents when we say things that are verbally abusive and verbally assaultive to the kid. But how would you feel, not just a grandparent, how would you feel if somebody tells you they wish you were not born? How
Right,
would you
Dr.
feel?
Miles, even as an adult, those
Mhm.
things are traumatic. So certainly to a child going through puberty, trying to find themselves, and now getting such negative association with themselves.
Mhm. Okay, Jackie, let's stop and think about our grandparents. Let's talk about an audience. Let's go back and think about how we saw our grandparents. Now, I'll be quite frank with you, y'all. Now, my memories of my grandparents ain't too wonderful because guess what? I feel like they had favorites. I feel like they ain't like our family more than the other families. I thought they thought we were the black sheep of the family, the whole family. So I have some issues.
Well, and Dr. Miles, I had, a completely opposite experience. Wonderful grandparents on my mom's side. Grew up there, just really a staple in my life. My grandmother and my grandfather were just staples in my life. And just always, I mean, when I tell you, my grandmother never uttered a negative word. And honestly, I'd wonder if she'd ever uttered one in her life, but
Mhm.
constantly supportive and reinforcing, you know?
But Jackie, I want to ask you something. Yeah, and I want the audience to chime in. Just thinking about your grandparents, what kind of feeling do you get?
It's that unconditional love. It's that even if things are not going right with your parents, there's unconditional love with your grandparents. Um,
Right.
There was always a look of amazement in their eyes, even when they saw you. They were just always so
Right.
happy to see you. And, like you said, didn't necessarily say it doesn't matter what mom or dad says, but it certainly was, whatever you want to do here, baby, we're here for you. So
Sure.
100% acceptance and encouragement for sure.
So Jackie, am I hearing you say also you felt like safe also?
Just unquestionably so.
Yeah. And so when you have those feelings, grandma, the first thing you said, I can't recall her saying anything negative. But Jackie, look how old you are now and how that still affects you, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
what about the child who's verbally assaulted and they get to be your age and they have these, I can't believe my grandmother said this to me. Because you don't forget it.
They will not
You,
forget it.
you may
Those thoughts will be with them. Those are therapy at 50 sort of comments. I've tried to
mhm.
manage it on my own, but now I know I need therapy. That's gonna stick.
But Jackie, what's interesting though, when I think about my grandparents on both sides of the families, I very rarely felt welcome. I didn't feel warm. I didn't feel like it was a place of refuge. I didn't. None of them ever touched me. I mean, they never embraced me. They never on both sides never gave an encouraging word. It was just so my memories of
Yeah.
grandparents on both sides of the family were not good memories. Whether they
Wow.
are whether they're my perception or not, the point is for me, I didn't have real good grandparents.
Right. And for you, perception, and for all of us, perception is real. How we received it for us is our reality.
So, audience, as you listen to Jackie and I talk about, like we're reminiscing, I want you all to think about this. What are the thoughts you have about your grandparents, be they negative or positive? What are the thoughts you have when you mention grandparents? What comes to your mind? But Jackie, we find that some grandparents now, we already have a disclaimer that this is not applied across the board. There are some great grandparents, but because of my um, engagement this weekend with these three Black males who grandparents said something horrible to them, I felt it was necessary to bring this out. Because my question is, how many others is this happening to? And who they talk to about it? Are you with me? So,
Absolutely.
so here we are now, just bringing to our audiences, to your light, that we need to have talk with our grandparents. And Jackie, I'm going to use the word you use all the time. The talk needs to be deliberate and intentional. And it's a talk before I even bring the kids to the house. I'm not going to talk to you about how to be a grandparent. I'm going to talk to you about how to be a parent to me and how to respect me as a parent and how to support me as a parent. In other words, if I tell my son no, don't you turn around and tell him yes. Because
Absolutely.
because it sabotages the relationship.
And grandparents should be a position of support. And in
Right.
order to support the child, we do understand it is necessary to support and lift up the parent.
Check. And some grandparents try to outbuy the parent. In other words, they outgift the parent. Oh, your
Wow.
parent bought you a box that big. Well, my box is gonna be bigger because I'm grandma. But what is
Well,
that?
even looking at that in a competitive way creates a problem, just off the bat. Shouldn't be a
Well,
competition. Should always be a support. Should always be things that are done together.
well, Jackie, I began to look at the the psyche of the grandparents. So I say when they have to try to be competitive with their child, it means that there's something that they fail to do for their child, and they're compensating for it through the grandchild.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is often the case. We're often trying to make up for what didn't happen with our children. And sometimes, Dr. Mouse, they're just bad relationships with the children, and it is an out and out competition. I mean, I have a good relationship with you, but I'm going to make sure that I have, a better relationship with my grandchild, even if that has to be without you.
Check. I have a no, this is a fourth case with a teenager who is 14 years old. When the parents discipline him, he calls the grandparents to tell on him.
You know, it depends on how that works, Dr. Miles. But if that is a serious situation, then clearly problematic. My children used to love the idea, the thought that I could get in trouble with my parents. And so, I mean, you know, it was a lot of humor, of course, but in a situation where that exists and it's real and it's serious, it's clear problems. And again, both parties have to realize the impact on the child. It's not even about the parent or the grandparent. It's what impact does this have on this child?
But you know, so the conversation really is, let's communicate. You know, we can have fun. We can jokingly say, listen, I don't care what they say. I'm the grandparent. I get it. Because I do it.
Right.
Well, I'm not a
Right.
good grandparent. I sabotage everything my son says.
I plan on being a horrible grandparent and doing just that. Spoiling them as much as possible.
I got to apologize to my son. I sabotage him all the time. The father disciplined, I said, don't touch him. I leave him alone. And my grandson loves it.
Of course, your grandson knows that he's loved.
So I apologize. So I'm gonna start being a good, not a toxic grandparent. But those toxic grandparents, Jackie, are those grandparents who believe they're still in charge of everything.
Right.
And you as a parent, you say yes. In other words, that the grandparent becomes oppositional to the parent.
And has a disregard for the parent. So again, there's one thing when we're joking and playing. It's another thing if we're serious. And we have to understand we cannot support children and disregard their parents, because, you know, healthy children need healthy parents and they need grandparents to respect that. So your
Jackie,
points are very well taken.
They undermine the parents. They undermine. And that's a big word, undermine.
Mm-hmm.
They undermine the parents. Now, these are toxic grandparents. See, Jackie, some grandparents ain't got nothing else to do but cause problems and drama.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're looking for something to do. And again, not considering the impact, I believe, on their grandchildren. So that could be problematic. And again, that's the purpose of our conversation tonight, to just bring some awareness that, you know, you can do harm.
Do you think that grandparents ought to be entitled to your children? Entitled?
In general, I don't think we're entitled to anything. You know, I think we need to. Right. I think we need to earn it. And it's about mutual respect. It's about being informed and understanding that you are still shaping a life. Right. And you have an impression and impact on that life. So, one, no, you're not entitled. It's a responsibility. Being a grandparent is a responsibility. Your number one responsibility is to support that parent, actually, so that they can be the best, because that's what's best for the child.
Right. But check this out. The research sort of says like that grandparents should not meddle in the parenting styles. Now, some of these parents need to be meddled. Trust me. The grandparents have to correct some of these folks. But my thought though is that parenting is a learned behavior, right? And
absolutely.
I have to see proper parenting from somewhere. So if I'm improperly parenting my child, where did I get it from?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just like relationships and other things. What's the model? And do we know the right way to parent and to grandparent?
Okay, what about the ones who play the grandkids against the parents?
Just as horrific as a parent playing a child against another parent. We know that is unhealthy for children. Any adult parent or grandparent should also know extremely unhealthy for any child, and just should be avoided at all costs. In fact, every effort should be made to do just the opposite. Go out of your way. You take whatever stress. You make sure that child has a stress-free environment.
But I think also, you know, part of the conversation is that I have to be able to tell my parents, listen, you're not being a good grandparent at this point. You're now hurting my child.
I'm sorry, Dr. Miles, repeat that. You're not to do what now?
We should have a conversation with our parents. we have our children. I'm saying telling our parents, listen, now, mom and dad, listen, when Johnny comes to your house, I have a set of rules. And the reason I'm allowing him to come there because I need you to back up my rules. Now, if
Yeah,
you can't do
very
that,
often a very difficult conversation, but very necessary.
little Johnny can't come over because Johnny can't be coming to your house doing anything he wants.
And then come back to me.
And he gets disciplined, and he's going to call and tell you on me.
I mean, it's hilarious in concept. Unfortunately, it really does happen. Unfortunately, grandparents do put themselves in some instances between children and their parents. And again, the purpose tonight is just to kind of point out how severely wrong
Yes.
that is.
We're talking,
Severely problematic.
we're talking about when grandparents do harm. Now, it's where they do harm consciously or subconsciously. To me, harm is harm. And so the point is, we have to be careful. And like one thing you just said is that these are still children and they're still impressionable. And so they have their thought about who you as a grandparent, who you are, and the status you are in your life, and that I come to you for safety.
And do remember exactly that they do not have your reasoning. They do not have your understanding. So even sometimes when you say things in jest or joking, that child is not operating from the same position you are. So you do need to choose your words carefully. And you do need to think about what you're saying and the impressions you're giving your grandchildren. It's not something that you can just kind of, free fall with.
Example, my grandchild at my house. Well, I'm just going to tell you this right because they probably ain't told you. But Joe ain't your daddy. And you ain't got to listen to him. He ain't your daddy. Bobby is. Bobby lives down the street. Now, mind you, parents have not had that conversation.
Dr. Miles, sometimes you crack me up because it's hard to imagine anyone being that out of place. But something, sadly, I know it happens.
Ready? I'm giving you a situation.
It's alarming that a parent would, a grandparent would take it. That is the definition of destabilizing a child.
Yes.
You have you've just thrown that child into a world of confusion, and caused some serious risk between them and their parents. So again, problematic.
How about this one? Grandparent tells the children, have your mama told y'all adopted yet? Has she told you about your birth mom, how she was on crack? I mean,
again, I just certainly hope that our grandparents, and I know they don't, but Dr. Miles, then we're having a conversation about the mental wellness of the adults in a child's life, because any grandparent that steps out there,
Jackie,
so severely off course is alarming.
Jackie Happening Clemens, the educator, I'm giving you real situations.
I've lived a couple of those. I've had grandparents come to the school and insist one thing and try to make one set of rules when the parents have already made another set. So trust, unfortunately, I do know that these are real scenarios.
So Jackie, they're called toxic grandparents. They are abusive, they are selfish, and they're manipulative.
Yes. And I think the key there is selfish. They are thinking about themselves, not those grandbabies.
Right. But I think also it's also about power and control, because those kind of grandparents would disregard your rules
Quickly. Right.
And the word is, it just sabotages all of your parenting.
And in a very cavalier manner.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it. But again, when you're doing that, you are not even coming close to suggesting that you have the best interest of your grandchild in mind. But at this point, you have a very unstable grandparent.
Selfish. And the thing about sometimes the children who parents do this kind of stuff, I'm talking about the adult children,
right?
They don't want to say anything about it for fear of insulting their parents.
Or losing that relationship, or perhaps their support, or even just offending them,
But see, that's where the conversation needs to be had then. Because what would happen in my case is that they'll be spending less time with grandma and less time with grandma and less time with grandma. And so instead of doing that, I'd have a conversation with mama. So listen, mama, this is the choice. If you can't support me in my parenting, these kids can't come over here that often, or they can only come when I come. But what about the parent who needs the grandparents as a babysitter? So they're gonna put up with anything the parent does because they need that babysitter. They need that babysitter. So it's important that we understand the different kinds of grandparents. Tonight's topic is when grandparents do harm. Now, again, I want to make sure we file a disclaimer. We're not saying all grandparents. We're not saying walk around like detectives. What I am saying really, that as a progressive parent, I would have a conversation with my parents about what my expectations are when I leave my children at your house. I expect you not to tell them anything that I've not told them, especially if it's personal about me, my wife, whomever, because that's my role. I would expect you not to tell them anything about themselves that you may know, especially if they're adopted, because that's my role to do that. And most certainly, I would hope that you not tell your children, my children, to not listen to me as their parent, but to only listen to you. Because my children are only with you for a few minutes, or for hours, or for a month, and then they're back with me. And basically it confuses them. So we're here tonight about when grandparents do harm. That's kind of amazing. You never thought you would talk about grandparents doing harm, because it just doesn't match, because grandparents don't do harm. Grandparents don't do harm. Grandparents are there to love. Grandparents there are to support and to make sure that I'm going to be okay, because that is the role of grandparents. The grandparent who does harm is the grandparent who spoils your child. Now, there's a difference between loving the child and spoiling them. And spoiling them is, okay, I'm teaching my child that he has to earn what he gets. As a grandparent, you're telling him that you don't have to do that, because I'll just give you anything your dad doesn't buy you, I'll get it for you, because I'm grandparent. Anything your parents don't get for you, I'll get it because I'm the grandparent. We must be very careful, at the message that we're sending. Also, the kind of like toxic grandparent would try to start having you feel guilty about the time you're allowing your children to stay with them. So I don't see how you could not have the conversation. It's just like at school. I'm going to have a conversation. If my kids are going to any sporting event or in sporting clubs, I'm going to have a conversation with the people that are in charge of those things. I'm going to have the conversation, because if their dialogue does not agree with my dialogue about parenting, my children are not going to be engaged in it. And or I'll make sure I have a conversation with my children, especially if they're old enough, to talk about my expectations. In other words, you're going to this group, they're going to talk to you about adolescence. But at the end of the day, I'm going to make those decisions with you. So I want you to go and get the information, and we're going to talk about it. So I think the parents have to make sure that we don't get into a place whereas we're the only person who can input into our children's lives. But guess what? We're the only person that can really control what's input into our children's lives. And we ought to take responsibility for that without guilt, without shame. Because your responsibility toward your children is to protect them physically and psychologically and emotionally. And so we have to make sure that we cover our bases and not be afraid to talk to people about our values, not being afraid to talk to people about our values. So do any of you all from our audience have experiences from grandparents you'd like to share with us? On both our Instagram and on Facebook Live. I'm going to wait on you. Or are you the toxic grandparent? Are you the toxic grandparent? Think about that for a second. I had to think about it because as I was doing the show, I was saying like, oh my God, what kind of message am I sending to my grandson, my granddaughter? What kind of message am I saying to my son? And to try to outdo my son means I'm trying to emasculate him as a father and as a man. And if I try to do that with his children, that means my whole parenting was in vain, because my parenting was just the opposite of that. So I think that grandparents can coexist with the parents of the children to make for a stronger, emotionally stronger grandchild. Love them to life. Love them to life. Don't love them to death. Love them to life, but don't love them to death by spoiling. Don't love them to death by sabotaging the parents. Don't love them to death by being abusive. Don't love them to death by being selfish, and most certainly not loving them to death by being manipulative. Because grandparents can be all of that: abusive, selfish, and manipulative, and say, I did it out of love. That sounds kind of conflictual to me. All right. Grandparents who do harm. I'm really sort of like want to stay on the focus of what grandparents say to children. Not only what they say, but how they say it. To tell a child that he is ugly. A grandparent to tell the child that you're ugly. Children already suffer emotionally from their peers telling them that. But from a grandmother or grandfather, you ugly? In the African-American communities, some grandparents like their grandchildren based upon skin color. Based upon their skin color, or they're light skinned. So they like the light skinned grandchildren, but they don't like the dark skinned grandchildren. They like the light skinned grandchildren, but they don't like the dark skinned grandchildren. Jackie's sort of asking me, can I let her back in? But I'm not that techno savvy. I hope our technician is on. Maybe he can show me how to do it. But I don't know how to let you back in. All I know, Jackie, you have to request to go live with me. And when you request to go live, I will then accept it, and you'll be back on with us. Are a grandparent telling a grandchild, they're pitting the grandkids against each other? Oh, Sue has more education than you got. That's why you're so stupid. A grandparent telling a grandchild that. A grandparent telling a grandchild, you're never going to be anything. See, the effects of a grandparent saying that, and a parent saying that, and a teacher saying that is totally different. All three, there are three different effects. But see, the teacher is considered like a mentor, so they're outside the home. For the parent to tell the child that, it hurts them. But for a grandparent to tell a child that, it destroys them. It destroys them. When grandparents do harm. How about grandparents who like the grandchildren based upon not them giving the grandchildren, but what the grandchildren give them? See, the reason I don't like you because you don't ever give me no money. And Bobby does. Every time Bobby comes to the house, Bobby breaks me off. Well, it's not the grandchildren's responsibility to break you off, first of all. If they chose to honor you that way, I said they chose to, let me say it slowly. If they chose to honor you that way, wonderful. But it's not a requirement for grandchildren to bring money and gifts to the grandparents just because they're grandparents. that's when grandparents do harm. Grandparents do harm when they treat one set of grandchildren different than the way they treat the other set of grandchildren. Grandparents do harm when they buy gifts for one set of grandchildren and don't buy them for the other set of grandchildren. Now, folks, let me file a disclaimer on that. If you don't have any interaction with the other grandchildren, and you don't even much know them, you can't do anything. Because some of our children got a bunch of children out there, we don't know them. And they want to tell you, oh, you ain't never do anything for my children. That's because you've not done anything for them. And I don't know who they are. If you introduce me to my grandchildren, maybe I can help out. So we can only do for those that we know about. It is harmful for grandparents to tell grandchildren, I wish you were not born. It's harmful for grandparents to tell grandchildren that I don't know who child you is because your hair ain't long enough. It's harmful for grandparents to tell grandchildren, you don't look like our family. Like, what does that mean? You don't look like our family. It is harmful for grandparents to take ownership of their grandchildren. It is harmful. It is harmful for grandparents to take ownership of their grandchildren. I know Jackie is trying to fight to get back on. She may not be able to get back on, folks, tonight because I'm not sure how to do that. But Jackie, if you're listening, we're still on live and we're still talking about these grandparents who do harm. Also, it's harmful for grandparents to try to relive their parenting mistakes or correcting their parenting mistakes through their grandchildren. For instance, I didn't give my child much attention, so I'm going to shower my grandbaby with it. I didn't give my child very much, but I'm going to give my grandbaby everything he or she wants. So if you give your grandchild everything he or she wants, it teaches them that they don't have to earn anything, that things will be given to them just because. We have to be very careful as grandparents, the message that we send. The message I sent to my grandchildren, I have high expectations of you. And the greatest expectation is that you honor your mother and your father. That's the biggest expectation. The next expectation is that you love yourself and that you build a resiliency within yourself that no one can tear you down. No man, no woman, no boy or girl can tear you down because you love yourself. I didn't say that you were in love with yourself because it's narcissistic, that you love yourself. This is what grandparents tell their children. Grandparents tell their children that there's a power much stronger than they are. And grandparents tell their children not to worry about the things they cannot control. And grandparents tell their children that the greatest joy that a child can be for their parents is to acknowledge them as parents. Those are the kinds of things that grandparents can do to help their grandchildren be the best grandchildren they can be. And not only be the best grandchildren they can be, but be the best children they can be, to be the best children they can be. And not, you're dealing with children today, but these kids are going to grow up to be adults and be parents and be grandparents themselves. And be grandparents themselves. So it's very important that as grandparents, we set the model for them. We set the model for them, and the model for being a great grandparent is allowing your grandchildren to model the behaviors, the positive behaviors that the parents have taught them, if they're positive. Now, I know you are saying, Dr. Miles, now some of these children, grandparents have to teach them some stuff because their parents ain't taught them nothing. Folks, that's different. That's different. I know that some parents ain't taught their children nothing because we see them in the schools and I see them in therapy. They ain't taught them nothing. And some parents have made their children everybody else's responsibility except their own. And that's when the positive grandparents come in. The positive grandparents. And the positive grandparents don't say, oh, your mama ain't no good. Yo, she ain't never been no good. She ain't want to go to school yet. No. You don't tell your grandchildren that. You'd say, well, guess what? Your mama does what she does because she's grown. And the point is, I'm going to help you be the best person you can be. And then you decide what road you want to walk down. You decide which road you're going to travel. As a grandparent, I'm going to teach you how to be respectful. As a grandparent, I'm going to talk about the stories of what got me over. Not saying you have to do that, but Jackie says, let me check. Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm trying to get her in. Hope I don't lose y'all. Okay, there we are. All right, let's see. Jackie, did I do it? Okay, you can get back in. Thank goodness.
Good to be back, but I've been listening the entire time, and yes.
Jackie, I want to give you some time because I've been talking a whole lot.
Okay, Dr. Miles, what I'm picking up on is really just people having a clear understanding, well, grandparents in this case, and sometimes parents, of how much damage can really be done to especially a young person, and even sometimes older grandkids, when we don't understand the roles that we play. Mm-hmm. Grandparents in no way replace parents. And sometimes, as you pointed out, that's the intent. And I also think that there is a thought that, you know, I'm just a grandparent. What I say is not really going to matter anyway, whether it's good or bad. You know, it's not going to affect that child because they have these loving parents. So just kind of being able to check ourselves. You know, sometimes the things that said are comical. When we talked about, you know, this grandchild breaks me off a piece, and this, I mean, Dr. Miles, really, I understand we have dysfunction, but we're talking about serious dysfunction at that point. And it's real, let's face it. And I'm sure our audience knows it's real. But just having grandparents, again, understand their role, that of being supportive, loving, nurturing, unconditional love.
Well, Jackie, I want to throw this up, and I shouldn't bring this up in the last minute because we have 7 minutes, and it could open a plethora of Pandora boxes. But we have now grandparents, and it's reality. Grandparents who depend on their grandchildren to bring them weed, because grandparents are smoking weed, and so the grandchildren say, "My grandma's down because she smokes weed with me." Now, I'm not here to judge. That's what you do, hey. But I am saying that you've kind of like broke the boundaries between grandparent and grandchild.
Again, understanding, which maybe is another session. What is the role of a grandparent? Where does the grandparent fit into, you know, the psychology of growing up? And so maybe those lines get blurred in some situations. Well, because clearly, if you feel that your role is having your grandchild supply you with weed, smoking weed with your grandchild, you're just not understanding. Again, no judgment, but perhaps not understanding the best role and the best way for you to support your grandchildren.
Well, let me get the other way around, because I gave you one way. The one way was that if the child was a supplier, grandchild supplier, but we have grandparents as a supplier.
Dr. Miles, I think you like to continue to shock me.
Baby, don't be serious.
And again,
where the grandparents are the suppliers. And on our last week, we were talking about parents who do drugs with their children. And they do that by saying, because I don't want them in the street doing it. So I want them to get caught.
Right. So doing it and being confused about the roles of parents and supporters is better.
It just blurs the boundaries.
Yeah, and I think the other thing they have to think about, it also means that it doesn't give them another place to go. It doesn't give them another option. See, it's one thing when you do these things with your friends, but then you have that other option in your parents, and you have another option in your grandparents.
Right.
When you are doing what you might normally do with your friends, with your parents and your grandparents, think about the child that wants out. Think about the child that wants to consider another alternative and now doesn't have that option to turn to because their support system is engaged in the activity they're trying to get away from.
Weed head granny. All right, Jackie, you lost some time, so Jack, I'm going to give you the last minute to wrap this up for us, because we lost you. I know you were real passionate about this. So give us some things that you think grandparents should do or shouldn't do, and we'll wrap up for the evening.
You know, I want to focus on the fact that we say grandparents. Okay, let's just go with the name. You have parents and you have grandparents. It doesn't just mean the next, level of parenting. It means grand. What does grand mean normally in our society? Exceptional, over and above.
Right.
So that's what grandparents should be, grandparents. And hopefully, I'm looking forward to having grandchildren. You have grandchildren. So we have to take our role in their life seriously and not just think of what they mean to our lives.
Right.
Okay? We need to be there for them. But I also would think as a grandparent, you would be thinking about succession and what you're leaving. What follows you in your children and your grandchildren. So it's beyond the moment. It's beyond the let me make my grandchild comfortable now. It's beyond let me compete with their parents. Let me undo it. It is about how am I contributing to the succession of a family line, right? Because a misguided child will raise other misguided children, and it will be difficult for them to continue, a family line in a successful way. So again, it gets back to the term intentional. Be grand, but be supportive. I think if I had to wrap up grandparenting into one word, it's support for the parents and the grandchildren.
Well, I can hear some grandparents saying this right here. Well, that don't apply to me because my name ain't no grand. My name is Nina, Nana, Mama Parker, and all those kind of names.
Nina, Nana, and all of that are other terms for grandparent.
Exactly. But I like the way you kind of brought that up and saying it's like, you need to be grand.
You need to be grand. You need to be grand in their life.
Yeah.
And that means they know that they can depend on you, not just to be there, but to guide them on right and wrong, to guide them on a path of success. They need you for that. They have many other alternatives for friends. They have all of the alternatives for, recreational behavior. They don't have other grandparents.
And stop seeing your grandkids talking what you brought me. What you brought me today.
Play your role. Know your role and play your role.
And listen, Jack, it's been wonderful. We're really hoping that our listening audience for both a Facebook Live and for Instagram have been enlightened this evening. I know I have been.
I have as
and
well.
I'm gonna change my.
Hopefully, I'll be a better grandparent.
I'm gonna change my grandparenting style.
You need to change your grandparenting style.
Daddy no more. I'm gonna stop telling him that. I got a call to apologize. I'm still don't listen to your dad when you come to my house. Anyway,
Dr. Miles, you cannot do that. Just undo it right now.
We're gonna see you next week, Jackie.
And audience,
we're gonna see y'all. Icon, thanks for being on. Thanks for supporting us, and all of our friends in Sierra Leone. Thank you for listening and watching us, and our Facebook watchers. We love you, and Instagram, you always have our back. Hey, listen, stop being so darn greedy. Tell other people about how you're being fed on every Tuesday night here on Let's Talk About It. We'll see you next week.
Don't miss it. Good night, everyone.